want to talk about ways you can run people away from you. Ways that you can run people away from you. How you interact with people. We either draw people to you or drive people away from you. Reverend Thompson, some people wonder why everybody wants to sit next to them, because they have good interacting skills. Look at your neighbor and say, "That's me. I know you're talking about me. That's me. That's me. That's me." Then now some of you wonder why nobody wants to sit next to you. Don't have a neighbor to talk to. Don't nobody want to sit next to you because you have poor interacting skills. Look at the neighbor, say, that's the folk behind us. Behind us. Don't look now, but behind. Now, interaction skills focus on skills that help you better relate to people. Today, we find ourselves in 1 Kings chapter 12. The main character is a fellow by the name of Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the oldest son of King Solomon. And when you read 1 Kings chapter 12, Solomon has just died in the previous chapter. Brother Brown, in those days, the Bible days, whenever a king would die, there was no vote taken. There was no election. There was no committee to put together to select a new king. It was a given, Horace, that the oldest son of the previous king became the new king. So here we are in 1 Kings, and Rehoboam, the oldest son of Solomon, is now the new king. And there are a couple of things to look for about Rehoboam in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 1 through 18. The first thing to look for in 1 Kings verses 1 through 4 is the debate with the king. A group of people decided to talk to King Rehoboam. In verses 5 through 11, you discover the delay by the king. The king doesn't want to rush into what he has to do, and he delays to buy himself some time. And then finally, in verses 12 through 18, we see the decision of the king. The king finally decides what's the best course of action is for him and the people in which he governed. And today we are going to look at a classic passage of scripture about poor interacting skills. In verse 1, Rehoboam went to Shechem because all of Israel had gathered to make him king. Now he is king because he inherited. Sam, he's not king because the people chose him. He is Solomon's oldest son. In verse 2, when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard that Rehoboam is now the king, he came back from Egypt, where he went to get away from King Solomon. Verse 3, the leaders of all Israel called on him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak to Rehoboam. Verse 4, a group of people said to Rehoboam, he said, "We want you to hear us out." They said, "Your father was a hard master." And they say, "If you lighten the harsh labor and the heavy taxes that your father put on us, we will be your loyal servants." They were saying, James, Rehoboam, don't be like your dad. Don't be like your dad. Now your dad was wise. Your dad was wise, but as he got older, he got a little crazy. He did some things that were very ungodly. Marcus, because in 1 Kings chapter 11 says that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 side pieces. I mean concubines. I don't know. It say concubines. I don't know why. What a man! What a man! What a very busy man. And the Bible says he loved strange women and ungodly women that turned his heart from God. He started doing silly and stupid stuff. So we came to you, Rehoboam, and said, don't be like your dad. We'll follow you. We'll follow you. But don't be like your dad. In verse 5, Rehoboam replied, now watch the delay. Give me 3 days to think this over and then come back, and the people departed. But you know what I like about him? He doesn't rush into a decision. He says, give me 3 days. But the Lord, some of us in here wish we waited 3 days before you gave him your number. Look at the name, say, I know that's right. Some of you wish you waited 3 days. 3 days before you accepted his proposal. And then in verse 6, King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older people. It's all in the Bible. And he who had helped his father. And he said, what's your advice? How do I answer these people? Verse 7, the older counselor said to him, if you're willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be loyal subjects. They were really saying, Hacksaw, listen, boy. Listen, boy. Listen, young blood. Listen, bone. You better listen. Because a hard head makes a soft behind. Listen. Because we old folk know what we're talking about. But in verse 8, Rehoboam rejected the older people, the older man advice, and instead he asked the opinion of the millennials. He got the advice from young folk who were 18 to 29. Those who listened to trap music with him. Those who grew up with him and were now his advisors. And in verse 9, he asked the young people, how should I answer these people who want me to lighten their burden that was imposed by my father? And in verse 10, the young people replied, this is what I would tell them old complainers, Bone. They want you to lighten their burden. Tell them your finger is thicker than your father's waist. And in verse 11, yes, tell them my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with a whip, but I'm going to beat you with a scorpion. A whip was a long belt, but a scorpion was a long belt with nails in it. Verse 12, watch the decision. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision. Just like the king ordered. Now watch his interacting skills right here in verse 13. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to the people. And he rejected the advice of the older counselors. In verse 14, and he followed the counsel of the young advisors. He told them, my father put heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with a whip, but I'm going to beat you with a scorpion. In verse 15, now this was God's doing because God had told Jeroboam in chapter 11, Eric, that the kingdom would split. And in verse 16, and when all the people realized that the king refused to listen to them, they said, "Down with the dynasty of David." Because David was always referred to as the king of Israel, because he was the greatest, he was their greatest king. Now when they say down with the dynasty of David, they were not saying we be down with the dynasty of David. With all your getting, get understand. In other words, they were saying blank with the kingdom of David. And look at your neighbor and say, you fill in the blank. They said, down with the kingdom of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. This was David's father. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your houses, O David. So the people of Israel returned home. Verse 17, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites that lived in the town of Judea. In verse 18, King Rehoboam sent his taxman to collect the taxes and to restore order. But when they saw him coming, they had some for him. It wasn't taxes either. They had some for him, but they stoned him to death. And when the news reached the king by Twitter, he quickly jumped into his Uber and got out of there. Now, what messed this brother up? He had poor interacting skills. And because of that, the kingdom split. It used to be 12 tribes, but now it became 10 tribes with one and 2 tribes with the other. And the Bible never says anything good about Rehoboam, King Rehoboam. So today, I want to speak about this because all Rehoboams ain't dead. There are some Rehoboams in here today. There are some Rehoboamettes. Look at the neighbor, say your name. Say your name. Say your name. Say your name. The first way to run people away from you is ungodly conversation. Verse 13. Rehoboam's first mistake was he didn't know how to talk to people. Verse 13, but Rehoboam spoke to the people harshly. When you don't know how to talk to people, you'll drive them away. Some in here messed up your job because you didn't know how to talk to people. That's why your husband don't want to come home. Because you don't know how to talk to people. Preach, Pastor, preach. That's why that's why your wife don't talk to you that much, because you don't know how to talk to people. That's why you don't do good in ministry, because you don't know how to talk to people. He spoke harshly, and there was no need for that. He's the one who told him to come back in 3 days. And when they came back, he had an attitude. Show your neighbor with your neck and your finger how Rehoboam was talking to him. Come on now, your neck and your finger. You ladies know how to do it. I mean, do your neck. And then you do your finger. He had an attitude. And we got to let our young people know you got to learn how to talk to people. We got to get back to saying thank you. Got to get back to saying please. Got to get back to saying may I. I know I'm preaching, amen. How many of you grew up in a home where you were taught not to call people older folk by their first name? That's not Joe. That's not Shelley. That's Mr. Joe. That's Mrs. Shelley. And when you wanted something, you say, may I? And say, please. And when you get something, you say, thank you. And when somebody say thank you, you say, you're welcome. But you always will mess up by talking to people like they're slaves. Look at your neighbor and say, don't talk to me in kind of way. Oh, if you don't look at them no time, look at them now. Don't talk to me. The second way to run people away from you is ungodly conduct. Verse 14. Number one, he didn't know how to talk to people, Haran. Then number two, he didn't know how to treat people. Because people who don't know how to talk to you, most of the time don't know how to treat you. In verse 14, my dad beat you with a whip, but I'm going to beat you with a whip with nails in it. He was saying, my dad made you work 8 to 5 with a break, with an hour break, Linda. But I'm going to make you work 7 to 7 with no break. He also said, when I come into your office and see you playing solitaire on the company computer, I'm going to pop you with this whip. When I go to the copy room and see you standing next to the fax machine, faxing your resume to another company. Oh, I struck a nerve now. I struck a nerve. It's right off in here somewhere. Right off in here somewhere. Row 4. Row 4, seat 7 and 12. Right here. Now, don't look at them. Just. When I see you, somebody clocking you in, and clocking you out, I'm going to pop you. When I see you with all the white out in your pocket, and all the paper in your backpack, I'm going to pop you. He didn't know how to treat people. There are some pastors that don't know how to treat people. You can't fuss at folk every Sunday. You can't be a ministry leader and treat people any kind of way. You got to learn that you're working. I tell folk this. You got to learn with the leaders of the church. I tell them, you got to learn that you're working with volunteers. You're working with volunteers. You can't just talk to folk and treat folk in a way. You can't fire them. They can quit. See? Amen. They can join another ministry. They can join another church. But you have to treat people right. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. The third and final way to run people away from you is ungodly conclusions. That's in verses 13 through 14. In verse 13, the text says, he talked to the older people. And then in verse 14, he talked to the younger people. But in no verse did it say, Big Mike, he talked to God. Because he made an ungodly this conclusion. That his conclusion was that he could handle this thing by himself. And when you have a difficult decision to make and don't talk to God, it's because you don't trust him. He didn't know how to talk to people. He didn't know how to treat people. And he didn't trust in God. Now, the strange thing about this is that his father wrote these words. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding.